This Week in History, February 6th through February 14th, 2026. 9 moments drawn from the historical record. Each day, a different chapter. We begin on February 6th.
On this day in 1952, Elizabeth II became Queen of the United Kingdom. She was 25 years old and traveling in Kenya when the news arrived. Her father had died while she was away. There was no coronation yet, no crowd, just the quiet knowledge that her life had permanently changed. History remembers the crown. But it began with a moment like this. On this day in 1964, the Beatles arrived in the United States. They landed in New York City to crowds far larger than anything they had known before, while reporters treated the moment with jokes and casual questions. Very few people there understood what was about to happen. Within weeks, American music and youth culture would begin to change permanently. History remembers what followed, but it began with a simple arrival on a winter day.
On this day in 1587, a queen walked into a room she would never leave. Mary, Queen of Scots, had spent nearly 20 years in captivity, not in chains, but never free. That morning was quiet, formal, almost respectful. There was no cheering crowd, no sense of certainty about what would come next. Her death was meant to secure a throne, to remove a threat that had lingered for decades, but it also left a question behind: how far a crown will go to protect itself. History remembers the reign that followed. It forgets the silence of that morning. On this day in 1969, one of the largest aircraft ever built left the ground for the first time. The Boeing 747 lifted off quietly from Washington State. It wasn't carrying passengers. There were no ticket stubs, no vacations waiting on the other end. But that first flight changed what distance meant. Travel that once felt unreachable slowly became ordinary. The world didn't feel smaller that day, but from that moment on, it would never feel quite as far apart. On this day in 1763, the Treaty of Paris was signed. It officially ended the 7 Years' War, a conflict fought across Europe, North America, and the Caribbean. Under its terms, France gave up nearly all of its North American territory. Canada passed to British control. Spain received Louisiana in compensation for its losses. The fighting had ended months earlier. But with these signatures, the map of the world was redrawn. Colonists would soon feel the consequences through new borders, new rulers, and new taxes imposed from far away. The treaty didn't just end a war. It quietly set the conditions for the conflicts that followed. On this day in 1843, someone wrote a computer program. At the time, no computer existed. Ada Lovelace had been studying a proposed machine called the analytical engine. It was meant to perform calculations mechanically. In her notes, she outlined a series of steps the machine could follow. What we now call an algorithm. The engine itself was never built. The idea endured. Computation began on paper, long before it lived inside a machine. On this day in 1809, Abraham Lincoln was born. He came into the world in a one-room log cabin in Kentucky. His family was poor. He had less than a year of formal schooling. Much of his youth was spent teaching himself by candlelight. No one at the time could have known that this child would one day help hold the country together during its greatest crisis. The beginning was ordinary. The consequences were not. On this day in 1935, a jury in Flemington, New Jersey found Bruno Richard Hauptmann guilty of the first-degree murder of Charles Lindbergh Jr. 3 years earlier, the infant son of aviator Charles Lindbergh, had been kidnapped from his home in New Jersey. The case captivated the nation. Hauptmann was arrested in 1934 after marked ransom bills were traced to him. The trial lasted 5 weeks and drew intense national media attention. On February 13th, the jury returned its verdict and sentenced him to death. The crime shocked the country, and the trial left a lasting mark on American justice. On February 14th, 1929, 7 men gathered inside a garage on Chicago's North Side. They were members of a gang led by George "Bugs" Moran, a bootlegging rival of Al Capone. Moran himself was not present that morning. 4 gunmen entered the garage, 2 dressed as police officers and 2 in civilian clothes, creating the appearance of a routine raid. The men were ordered to face the wall before being shot with submachine guns. All were killed. The attack became known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. No one was ever convicted, though suspicion fell on Capone's organization. The event intensified national concern about organized crime and strengthened efforts to prosecute gang leaders during the final years of Prohibition. These were the events that shaped this week in history. We return tonight.